Muy buenas tardes, mi gente. Today is Wednesday, August the 7th, 2024, y aquí con ustedes la comadre B with another episode of Comadreando aquí y con café. Como siempre, first I want to give out my saludos. Hi, Mom. Today I also wanted to say hi to all my regulars. Hey, guys. To a friend of mine, Tony Lucero. Hi, I hope you watched this episode. He's been kind of under a little bit, so I hope he is better today. I also wanted to say hi to another friend of mine, Patrick, over at the radio station. He's at KQBH Radio in Boyle Heights. The other day, I did mention him briefly on the episode I did with Blanca G. So this is your formal saludo. Hey Patrick, I am going to see him soon. Before we get into the story, I want to take the time right now to give a trigger warning that the details that I will be sharing in this story are really violent and could be too strong for a younger audience. So, with that being said, you have been apprised. This is your warning. So today is Wicked Wednesday, and this story fits perfectly in that category. So I guess we will jump right to it. As I had mentioned on the third and final installment of the Zoot Zoot riots last week, if you were following, I told you guys I would make a whole episode on the events that came prior to this whole boiling point that we went through in the city of LA that led up to the Zoot Zoot riots. So this is gonna be that episode. I will be speaking about Jose Diaz and the events that took place on the day of his murder. It was a very impactful event that took place in Los Angeles, and everything after following his specific case was super dramatic. So that in itself will obviously take different installments to get through the whole case with his murder and the people involved with that. But today we will just focus on who was Jose Diaz, what happened to him, and the neighborhood that he pretty much grew up in. Alright, Raza, so I am taking you back into time. The year is 1942. This specific event that took place was in an area that was then known as Williams Ranch, which is now part of Commerce. Williams Ranch was a really tight-knit community, and it consisted of clusters of small bungalows that were purposely built in this area, in this layout, for the farm owners, ranch hands, and their families. So that is the people that occupied these small bungalows. It was all the farm workers, the factory workers that helped these farm owners in this remote area. So it was obviously beneficial to have them living in that specific area, since that is where their factories were, obviously crops and stuff of that sort. So the main people you will find here is Hispanic. Yes, Hispanic. You drive up the dirt road a little bit, there was a water reservoir there. During the day, for these little communities next to this reservoir, people used to use it, especially through summertime, as a place to go and get wet, go swimming, that kind of stuff, hang out, picnic in the area. It was a very nice sized reservoir. So the families in that area, all the community people, used to take advantage of it in that way, to use it as a gathering spot during the day. Now, in the late evening, it was something totally different. You can consider it somewhat of a lover's lane, a romantic remote area where all the youth used to go and hang out, sit in their cars, have private time, kissy time, all that stuff. They would even park there, come out, walk around, hang out on the sides of the actual reservoir, the water. Y pues ya se imaginan, it wasn't something like, oh my God, but it was, it was respected. Everybody knew what it was for in the evening. And this reservoir was known as the Sleepy Lagoon. There was even a song written for this lagoon, and it's a love song, this and that, a ballad, it says. So yeah, that's what this specific water reservoir was for. Okay, so on the other side of this reservoir, there was another neighborhood known as La Calle 38, 38th Street. Now, in this specific neighborhood, we had a bunch of more low-cost housing. That was a community of its own, and they weren't considered part of the other Hispanic community where they were ranch hands or farmers. They were a little bit upper level, I guess you can say, although they were still considered poor. Anyways, this neighborhood was, as well as Williams Ranch, super tight-knit. Everybody was close. Everybody knew everybody. Nobody really wandered out of their area. The farthest they would really go to mix with Williams Ranch was the lagoon, this reservoir, and of course work. Some worked in the same factories, this and that. They knew each other, but they just would not hang out together. So there you have that. Everybody in these areas, these communities, these blocks knew where they could go, where they shouldn't go, what are their limits, stuff of that nature. So the music of this time was called race music. It was mainly brought by the black musicians. So in other words, it was mainly on the jazz tip. It was jazz, okay? So obviously these communities, these neighborhoods didn't have anything going on. What they had to do was drive down to the other side of Los Angeles off of Central Avenue, and this is where you would find the nightlife. It was Central Avenue, 3rd and Broadway. That's where you would find nightclubs, you would find bars, or just plainly musicians playing on the sidewalks. You would also have malt shops, the actual movie theaters, pretty much everything to make your nightlife that much more fun. And they had the All Nations clubs also in that area. So everybody that wanted to have a good time from the Williams Ranch, 38th Street, 42nd Street would drive over to this part of which was East LA, and this is where they would party. Dancing was a big old deal. They had their own dance style that was very new. It was called the Pachuco Hop. It was taken from a very similar dance that was super huge the year before that was called the Lindy Bop. Of course, these kids started mixing in their own moves, and they came up with what was known as a Pachuco Hop. Their parents didn't know they were doing this type of dance, but nobody has to tell them, right? They're back home, ya dormidos, who cares? The clothes in style, like I have mentioned before, was the zoot zoot. It was very popular with the actual Pachucos who were gang related in this time, but also these type of kids liked the style, they liked the look, so they would mimic that look with the pegged pants, white shirts, that kind of stuff, which they would use mainly weekends or for special occasions like weddings, quinceañeras, stuff of that sort. In this moment in time, we already had Little Tokyo, Little Italy, Chinatown. Even Watts was already established with our black community on the other side of Central. They also had another neighboring neighborhood out there called Dogtown. So everybody stuck to their own, like I said before. Everybody knew where to go, where not to go, where you're welcome, where they'll be looking at you kind of off. So that was this reality at the moment. Another very cruel and ugly reality era que if you were any shade other than white, there was discrimination upon you. If you were black, if you were Mexican, something as simple as finding a restaurant that would serve you was a big wow. A lot of places had signs that said, if you are Mexican, if you are black or a dog, we refuse service. Yes, that was our reality for our gente. If you found a restaurant that was okay with serving you, you would come in. If you found a table that was dirty from a previous customer, meaning dishes and silverware that's used and stuff, you can either sit down and wait till we come to help you, or walk out the same door you just walked in from. That's it. Like I said, they wouldn't go out of their way to clean utensils, so if that fork had dressing from somebody else's meal, wipe it off with the napkin, use it, and be quiet and go on with your day. There was no special treatment as far as let me treat you with respect and dignity and bring you brand new stuff. It was just like either you do or you don't. Stop wasting our time. And this, guys, is a clear picture of what living in these areas was like in 1942. Another very shameful situation that La Raza had with the police was this area, the Williams Ranch, La 3842 Street, and Chavez Ravine were all specifically Hispanic people, Hispanic families that lived there. They were heavily patrolled by police officers. What the police would do is break up every small gathering they could find and find reasons to just be messing with the people in these communities. For example, say there was a party, a group of people in a park celebrating a birthday party. These officers that would be patrolling the area would park, approach this party, make everybody leave, and whoever the host was that was throwing this party would end up getting arrested. And not only that, once they were putting into booking at jail, they would get beat till they admitted they were guilty. Guilty of what? Being in the park after dark. That is what this was like for all of our community members. So it was safe to say the sun went down. All these neighborhoods were pretty much quiet unless they were far away from this specific area or quietly hanging out at the lagoon. Alright, guys, now that you have a whole idea, a clear idea of the way life was, let's get into the actual date that this event took place. The date was August 1st, 1942, to be exact. The celebration was for a neighbor in the Williams Ranch clustered community, which was named Eleanor Delgadillo. She was turning 20 years that day. That's the celebration. And as you can just imagine, everybody and their mother that lived in that specific neighborhood was invited. So there was about 30 families that were to attend this huge event. They had food for days, they had beer for days, they had live music, you name it. That is the kind of party that this was. Well, this party started kind of late. About 9 o'clock is when pretty much everybody was present. And even 20 guests that were uninvited were among the party goers. They were 2 cars that came packed down with young men over from Downey. Yes, guys, the city of Downey. During this gathering and all these people that were present, the attendance of male dominated the female, so there was pretty much 2 guys per 1 girl. So a lot of the guys were just hanging around on the corners of the yard and stuff, drinking and hanging out, doing whatever. Intermission for the band hit about 11 o'clock p.m. And the Downey boys were super drunk, so they were belligerent. They started yelling at Eleanor's dad, demanding more beer. What kind of host are you? Go buy us more beer, this and this, this and that. Obviously, they didn't want to give them no more beer, because first of all, they weren't even invited. Nobody even knew who these freaking guys were. Mr. Delgadillo escorted them off of the property, the whole, gated or fenced off community. Told them, you guys got to go, whatever. Se fueron, bien enojados, because they were thrown out. Okay, so as they are leaving the Williams Ranch party, the area, you seen the map earlier, the lagoon was right up the dirt road. They are packed into these 2 cars. They are pissed off. They are freaking drunk. So they pass by the lagoon and they see a couple sitting in a car. As they see the couple, they start yelling and cussing them out in English and Spanish, blah, 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 you name it. Okay. Now, the guy and the girl that were sitting in this car was Henry Levas and his girlfriend, Dora. Henry Levas was a little hothead. He was very known on 38th Street. Not too much of an actual pachuco or gang related, but he was a little bit of a troublemaker. Every time he got in trouble, he would contest the police. The police hated him for that, porque no se dejaba. So that was Henry Levas. Of course, these 2 cars pass by, start flipping him off, cussing him off, this and that. He responded with the same language and the same form, and the cars did not like it. Once they realized that, Henry was like, what? Instead of continuing to exit this area, they turned back, parked, and came out of their cars. So at this point now, they're face to face with Levas, which he is out of his car too, because he ain't backing down. Poor Dora, the girlfriend's like screaming and crying, like, stop, leave him alone. They're in each other's faces, and things got ugly, guys. Really, really ugly. 16 of the 20 Downey boys started hitting Henry Levas. They started beating him. They were cussing him out. They're throwing like beer bottles that they still had from the party. You name it, it was going down. Poor Dora screaming in horror as she's watching her boyfriend get beat up. She's trying to shield them, thinking they're going to respect her because she's a woman. Heck no, she's getting beat up too. Well, there was other cars parked along the side of Henry and Dora, and all these couples were in the ravines, in the bushes, in the fields, making out, having their private time. Once all this escándalo breaks off and they start hearing all the hoot and holler and screaming and crying that Dora was doing really loud, one by one they start coming out of the woodworks to see what the hell's going on. No, forget about it. Once they seen that they're beating up on Henry and hitting Dora, it became a big time rumble. You had the Downey boys, you had the 38th Street boys, everybody's just going at it. But the Downey boys had, sticks and clubs and stuff, so se los estaban fregando a los 38th Street. After a while, little by little, they stopped, their whole freaking brawl. And some of the guys from 38th Street that were like already injured were hiding out on the tall grass, trying to keep clear. And even though they heard their name, like, hey, they were kind of scared to come out. Once everything was completely silenced, everybody came out, they gathered themselves and drove back home to 38th Street. Once they got there, Henry was looking for somebody. He couldn't find them. He made his way up to 42nd Street, the neighborhood on the other side. As these cars roll up and everybody on 42nd Street was hanging out at a girl named Bertha's house, when they see these cars approaching y miran que están todos beat up, what the heck happened? Henry said, you know what? They got us, That's what happened. They got us. One of the guys that was hanging out at Berta's house is like, let's go out there. All right, say no more. They started getting whatever weapons they can find. They started calling other people. We're going to meet over down at Los Amigos Club. And that's exactly what they did. That was their plan of operation. They were going to drive over to Downey, look for these two cars that beat the heck out of Henry and Dora. And they were going to retaliate. Okay, so they make their way over the block to Los Amigos Club. There were 6 cars deep that they gathered right here that were 38th Street and 42nd Street. Altogether, they met up with 2 other cars full of people. It was a total of 8 cars now. The time was 12:30 in the morning, a.m., and there was a mob of 22 young men and 13 young women. Talking, making plans how they're going to approach this and go hunt these other guys down. Somebody suggests they came from Williams Ranch. Maybe they're still there. Ding, the little light bulb clicks. They all, vámonos. They drive back down to Williams Ranch. And Henry tells everybody else because he's pissed off. He's leading this because he wants revenge. How dare they beat on him and his old lady as they're sitting there just minding their business. So he tells everybody, paguen las luces, right? Turn all your lights off. Let me be the car in the front, the only one with the lights on. So the party, these guys, the Downey boys, could think there's only one car coming. Everybody's like, yeah, okay. So Ivan, you got guys standing on the sideboards of these cars. You got people hanging out of the cars because they are crammed. Finally, they go down the dirt road past the Sleepy Lagoon. Nobody's there, obviously. They just took a little peek just in case. They continue to go down the road to where the Williams Ranch was at. And at this point, by the time they made it back to the party where everybody was at, the party was pretty much already over. It was literally 1 a.m. when they were rolling up. Okay, there was obviously people walking home, people driving away. So yeah, they were passing these cars, right? As some girls were hanging out in the front waiting for their rides, like their parents to come get them. All of a sudden, 2 of these girls run back into the fence, and one of them starts yelling, there is a bunch of boys coming this way, and they are mad. And they have sticks, said the other girl. Well, all of a sudden, parking cars y todo, up to the fence llega Henry Leivas and 6 other guys. And at this point, Eleanor, the party girl, is near the fence asking what's up, They're sitting there looking at her all pissed off, and they ask, where's the boys at that said they were going to beat us? So Eleanor's confused as heck. She looks at them and says, there's no boys here. Everybody's gone. Say no more. Henry laid eyes on some guy. They just bum rushed the whole party. There was beer bottles. There was bricks being thrown at the party goers that were still here. They were beating up on girls. They were beating up on women. They were just beating up on everybody. People are fighting back. Eleanor's brother-in-law got beat up. They beat up her sister. You name it, this was going on. Estaba bien feo todo. At that moment when everything broke off, Eleanor's father was in the restroom. So sale el señor, to the surprise that this whole party and all this drama is just going on. He's like, what happened? They beat him up too. There's guys laid out on conscience. They're still getting stomped out. Era un desmadre. All of a sudden, a voice yells out, "The police is here!" As quickly and crazy as this fight got, it cleared out. Se fueron the 38th Street guys back in their cars. Their little mob took off. All their girls, everybody took off. The people that were left at the party that were laying around injured and hurt, the ones that were hiding, everybody started coming out to check on each other, to see if they were okay. They were beat pretty bad. Eleanor's dad was sitting on the floor. He had cuts on his face, blood just rolling down his face. They didn't even know what hit them. They're like, what the heck was that about? Well, as the whole scene is getting checked out, somehow down the road, as they're looking, outside the fence, block or so down, they find a body laid on its back. Once they go and approach it, they find that it was the 22-year-old Jose Diaz. Yes, guys, he was laying there, bleeding very heavily, hardly breathing. His pockets were turned inside out, and he was just laying there. Right away, when they recognized who he was, somebody ran over to his house to, inform the family, that Jose wasn't doing too well. Just as all this is going on, okay, Jose's dad was up north picking prunes. His sister Socorro had ended up sick, so the father made his trip shorter. And as he's rolling in, this is the news that he's coming home to, that his oldest son Jose is badly injured. They don't know how bad, but he's pretty much dead. Okay. Corre para atrás, Jose's younger brother Lino, and he's just standing there on the side of the road. They had at this point already called for an ambulance to come and pick up Jose. So he's just talking to him what's going on. Jose's barely answering any questions. He's really, really bad, super bad. Who was Jose Diaz? He was an innocent party goer that ended up being murdered. He was 22 years old. He was originally from Durango, Mexico. He was born out there in 1919. His family decided to cross the border. They made El Paso, Texas, home for a little bit. But by 1928, Los Angeles was home to Jose Diaz. He lived in these William Ranch bungalows with his father, Teodoro, and his mother, Pamphila. He also had a younger brother and sister, which were Lino and Socorro. Jose didn't finish school. He dropped out at 8th grade to get a job and help the family. So yeah, he worked and gave his earnings to his mother. A couple years later, the brother and the sister joined as well. They used to work at Sunny Sally Packing Plant. He was an actual farmer there. His sister and brother were in the packaging department. Socorro speaks of her brother and says that, yeah, he was with the times. He was handsome. He used to wear the peg pants and the white shirts and all that stuff. And this is the only picture they have of him right here. And she says that, ironically, her brother had enlisted in the U.S. Army. And he was to report for duty, or, for the first time, the process, everything else, that next Sunday morning, which was the 2nd of August. They were obviously very poor, so they never had pictures taken of them. They had no cameras. This specific picture is the only picture ever that this family has of Jose, and it was taken because obviously he had to have a picture to take with him for his paperwork to the army. His mom scrounged up money about 2 weeks before. She told him, te bañas, te cambias, vente bien bonito a sacar tu foto, because you're going to the army, you need your papers in order. Socorro says she's so thankful that her mother made him take that picture so she could remember how handsome her brother was. She says que era muy callado el muchacho. He wasn't crazy out there andando con cosas ni nada. So it was very unfortunate for this family and their loss because it came as a big shock and surprise. You know, Jose wasn't that type of kid. Ironically, that Saturday morning, obviously the invitation was there to go to Leonor's party. He had told his mom he wasn't in the mood. No quería ir, this and that, blah, blah, blah. Empezó la música y todo. Last minute, he changed his mind and he ended up going to this party. Like I mentioned earlier, his dad was up north picking prunes. So somehow during this time, his sister Socorro was sick. So the message was sent, or the dad called in to check in. I'm not sure how that happened, but the dad came home early because Socorro was sick. And you know, the rest you guys know what happened. During the whole time of the party, remember I told you that it was overcrowded with guys, 2-to-1 with the girls. A lot of little groups of muchachos were hanging around in the corners just drinking porque pues no había con quien bailar o echar party, you know. The girls were busy doing their thing, dancing with other guys, not dancing at all, couldn't dance. So, you know, Jose was one of the guys that was in a little group with 2 of his co-workers. They were Luisito Vargas and Andrew Torres. They worked with him at the packing plant, so they hung out all night off to a corner, listening to music, comieron. They were just drinking, having a good time. They were on their way home when everything happened. They're not sure how Jose ended up close to what is the Sleepy Lagoon, but that is where they found his body. The friends were never questioned by the police, but it's like, you know, when everything happened, every man for himself, so people were running, fighting back, this and that. So I guess they didn't even realize that Jose was down and hurt. I'm gonna grab my cheating book to tell you the lacerations that he had. Once again, Lino stood by his brother. They were waiting for the ambulance. It took them about 45 minutes to get there. They found Jose heavily bleeding, barely breathing. His pockets had been picked. His face was super swollen, especially above his nose. He had bleeding from the inside of his left ear. He had been stabbed twice, one right under his breastbone. And on his left hand, he had a broken finger. Yeah, they left him pretty bad. Once they got to the general hospital, and I say they because his brother Lino went with him, they arrived just a little bit after 3 in the morning. The cause of death was the result of a contusion of the brain, hemorrhaging due to fracture of the skull. That is what caused Jose Diaz to pass away. At 4:30 a.m., laying quietly in his bed, Jose Diaz died. That was the end of him. It's so hurtful to think of the amount of pain this poor kid went through. Meanwhile, the process was narrowing down to him dying. Innocent as well. So once again, you know, when you live a certain way, you know you are putting yourself in a specific activity range, right? If all you do is work and you're serious and you're not out there messing around, this is a horrible way to go out. Imagine the fear of getting attacked like everybody else and not even knowing why. Later publicity, the newspapers, the police, everything else said that it was gang-related death, that it was gang violence, that it was due to the Pachuco problem. That's what they said. The family was super upset because now they're tainting his name, saying things that weren't true. He was not a Pachuco. He was not in a gang. He was none of those things. He was just son and brother, Jose Diaz, the farm worker, that was so excited to go off to the army. This case went on for 2 years because they did detain 17 young men that were involved with the whole rumble that happened when they came back from 38th Street. Era un escándalo de aquellos. Movie stars were involved. They started a committee, attorneys, this and that. Eso es otro día, otra historia, because it is very full of detail, and like I said, it rolled over for 2 whole years. Pero this is what I have for you, Raza, today. The story of what happened and who was Jose Diaz. Alright, I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Please stay hydrated because it is freaking hot. Stay safe, stay sane. Los adoro, Raza. Bye.